Hi, welcome to Garage Geek Friday Night Chats on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. It's kind of morning afternoon ish. So the reason I didn't put out a video on Friday is because I got COVID. This is shaking, sorry. It's connected to my table and I keep hitting my table. I got COVID and I got it bad. So on Friday, I was really, really stupid. So I was feeling a sore throat, and like normal, teachers use their voices so much that we often get sore throats, and we work through them, right? So I use Ricola. I have them all the time, but this was a little bit stronger. It was hurting, and so by the time I got home from school on Friday, my husband was like, "Oh, you need to test for COVID." And you know what? I didn't even really think about that because it was just a sore throat. And I've had COVID-like symptoms before, and I've tested, and there was even a couple days when I had a really strong flu. I stayed home, in fact, 1 or 2 days from school. This was months ago, and it was never COVID. I kept testing, and so I really didn't think it was COVID. So then I tested, and bam, it was positive, and I was like, "Oh God." I'd been at school the entire day with COVID. And I felt awful because who knows? Like, I do the same thing. I'm always close to students, helping them on their computers. I'm constantly roving the room. Every time a student has a problem, I can see in the computer because it'll turn orange, and that lets me know that a student is having a problem, so I can go right up to them. And I do this constantly. And I was just thinking back, oh Lord, like I was in people's faces. It's not funny, but I was just in students' faces all day with COVID. And I was just thinking to myself, what have you done? But anyways, back to me, right? Because this is all about me. So the entire weekend, I was just like, okay, my daughter just had COVID like 2 weeks before. She felt it on Thursday, tested on Friday, and by Sunday, she was fine. And so I was like, okay, hopefully it's going to be something like that. Nope. This hit me hard. For the last 5 days, I've had fevers off and on, chills. It's been like this crazy ride where I haven't even felt like moving, getting out of bed. Like a fever would break, I would be covered in sweat. I'd have a few hours of relief and then boom, the fever would start again. I had terrible headaches, back pains. I think what it was is I'm prone to backaches, and I think it just attacks wherever you're weak. And it went after my back, and man, my back was hurting. No spasms though, thank goodness. So today is Wednesday. I tested on Friday. I felt bad Friday. It really hit me Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Today's Wednesday, and today is the first day I feel like functioning like a normal functioning human. I'm totally not 100%. So it's been crazy. But I have to test. I have today off work and tomorrow, and I have to test tomorrow. And depending on those test results, if it's negative, I get to go back to work, but I have to wear a mask. But if it's positive, then I have to be in isolation a full 10 days. I don't know how it affects pay because the district is no longer like giving people with COVID like a free ride. I hate to say it like that, but before it didn't come out of our sick days, but I think it might now. And this is the most I've ever in my entire career taken off. I've already been off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's only been 3 days, but I'm definitely going to be out minimum 4 days. So anyways, most of you, I'm sure, out there have had COVID, and this is my first time to have it. And so, I mean, but it really hit me hard. And I think maybe it's because of my age, because my daughter had it and she was over it within like 2 days. But I'm sure there are other factors, it could be the strain, whatever. Oh, another bad thing is like the day after I tested, my husband got it. He's got it too. So I definitely gave it to him. and he's going through all of the symptoms now that I did. So he's in that part where he's going through that horrible agony. Poor guy. I feel so bad. So now I'm the one that's got to take care of him. Poor guy. It's really an awful thing. And so this COVID is no joke. All right, I've already talked about COVID for 5 minutes. So I didn't make my Friday night chat, obviously, because I felt like crap. And today's like the first day that I'm feeling okay. And I've got a full list of stuff that I need to go over. So I'm actually going to divide this into 3 videos. I'm going to do one today based on the books that I've listened to. The one for tomorrow is going to be movies and TV shows. And then the one on Friday is going to be anything left over, anything that I've done in a couple of days, plus all the other things like comics, music, controversial topics. And I'm also going to be covering 2 people who have died, who I felt a real affinity to, and that is both Topol and Kenzaburo Oe. I actually haven't researched into Kenzaburo Oe yet, but my friend told me that he died. I lived in Japan, and I read a lot of his work while I was in Japan. I just really, really enjoy him as a writer, and I haven't read anything by him in a long time, actually. But he's also going to tie into a theme that I'm working on, Nobel Prize winners, which I'm going to show you in a little while. But also Topol. Topol is an actor, right, who is most famous for being Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. And I actually got to see him perform that live in Cleveland. And it was a wonderful show, but it was years and years ago. But of course, he acted in many other things. But he's just... I really respected him as an actor, even though I don't know much about his personal life. So I'm going to do a little bit of research before I talk about him and Kenzaburo Oe on Friday. So yeah, today, books. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books, all kinds of like all over the place. A few of the books are on this list, and I'm talking about them because they were recommended by a YouTuber that I follow named Eric Carl Anderson. I'm going to put a link to him in the description. He normally covers a lot of book prizes, and I'm kind of jealous because he just did a video, and he's becoming so prominent as a reviewer that the Booker Prize just sent him the entire catalog of the International Booker Prize long list. So that's 13 novels. And he's going to read them. And he did an overview video of all the books. And now he's going to be reading them. And I mean, good for him. That's amazing. But they just sent him that. And he well deserves it because he does great reviews on all of these prizes, and he actually interviews some of the people who write the books and translate the books, and he goes to the award ceremonies, and he gives live reactions. I think if you're interested in any of the books that I'm going to talk about today, you should probably follow him. So like I said, he just put out a video for the 13 International Booker Prize long lists for 2023. And I immediately went on my library webpage, and although they had about 6 of them in ebook print editions, there were only 2 available as audiobooks, and I went ahead and put those on hold. I already got one in. So maybe next week's video, or within 2 weeks, I will be talking about one of those books. Oh, I look all scraggly. Anyways, you're looking at grizzled COVID grandpa right here. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these books now. Whenever one of the books is recommended by Eric Carl Anderson, I will be sure to let you know. Okay, the first book I want to talk about is called 7 Steeples. Oh, I'm also going to talk about this new iPad. armor that I got. It's called, you can see that I have it new. It's fingerprint resistant, and you can see that when you touch it, it's nice. I also got it for another reason. I'm going to go over that on Friday, and I'm going to go over this product in that third video. But it's looking good. It also reduces a lot of glare, as you can see, right? All right, so here we go. Sorry, I really do need to cut my fingernails. I will. So sorry you're gonna see my fingernails in the video. I like to keep my fingernails short. That's just a personal preference. All right. So the first book I'm going to talk about is called Seven Steeples by Sarah Baum. Baum. Okay, so Seven Steeples. Now, this was a book recommended by Eric Carl Anderson, and it won a couple of major awards, but none of the awards that I follow. But it won those awards, so I decided to give it a try, and boy, am I glad that I did. This book is phenomenal. Okay, so it is not plot-driven at all. So basically, this husband and wife moved to a rural type of farm, and the book describes their life over an 8-year period. And every chapter begins with them talking about how they have not climbed a mountain. So they live at the base of a mountain, and the mountain is always there, and how that there's this beautiful view from the top of the mountain where you can see 7 steeples. So that's where the you can see 7 there's like a 777 thing, 7 steeples, 7 schools, something like that. All right, you can see a bunch of 7s at the top. Okay, so for the first 7 years they don't climb the mountain, but what this book is, it's all description. It's hardly any dialogue. These two people grow to become almost like one person. That's actually in the blurb. It just talks about how their life in some ways deteriorates over time, and how it changes and becomes more rhythmical with nature. What's really interesting is how the book describes how they start peeling off the layers of civilization. And by what I mean by that is like the contact with the outside world. Like at one point, they give up the need for their car. It's just, but the way it's described, like first they give up the need to communicate with people from the outside. First, they start with emails, like just not responding to them. And then how this process, and meanwhile, the whole time this is being described, it's also talking about how the house is changing and what they have in the house and what they eat. And so as you can see, it's a very descriptive book, and it encompasses a lot of describing them, their house, their surroundings, nature. It's just such a phenomenally beautifully written book. If you're looking for plot, this is not for you. This is a book that is all, it's very, like it's like an extended poem, a narrative poem, kind of, even though this isn't a narrative in many aspects. Wow, do I recommend this book. I guess there's, like, I read this book a long time ago, and I'm going to make the connection just because I haven't read many books about nature writing, but I have read the book Silent Spring, but man, it was years ago. So since that's my only frame of reference, that's like the only thing I can compare it to, right? Because if I remember, if it's the right book, that whole book is just describing nature and flowers and rivers. I think I remember like the river being described over and over again. I mean, that's the whole essence of the book, and that's what this is. So I am so glad Eric Carl Anderson recommended this book, and I highly recommend it. And I think that this book is a winner. And if you do read this and you don't like it, I can understand why, but I'd love to hear about that. Or if you've even read it or tried to read it and you just can't get into it, I could totally understand. Like, this has really, I mean, it does have a plot, but that's on the back burner. That is not what this book is about. Okay, so enough like fawning over that book. That book is so good. I loved it. All right, so the next book is by Abdul Razak Gurnah. Okay, Abdul Razak Gurnah. Sorry if I'm butchering your name, Abdul Razak. Abdul Razak. Anyways, it's called Memory of Departure. Let me get rid of that. Sorry, there's a notification on my phone. Okay, so the reason I read that is because I'm trying to do more with the Nobel Prize winners. And so I want to show you, I've shown this before, this Freeform app. It's a free app, which I absolutely love. Oh, that light on my face is not good. So I made this Nobel Prize in literature. So I basically copied and pasted this giant list of all the Nobel Prize winners. And I'm going to go through them to the best of my ability. Now, there are some, like Kenzaburo Oe, who I've read a whole bunch of his books already, and I just haven't gotten to him yet. And then there are others, like Louise Gluck. I don't know, it's G-L-U with an umlaut. Gluck. It's not Gluck. But anyways, Louise Gluck. She won it in 2020, and I haven't read anything by her. That's going to change. But what I'm doing is, for each person, so this one is Annie Ernaux. She won it most recently, and I've talked about all of these books except for this one, which I'm going to talk about today. So this is Shame. So as I read the books, I'm just putting a picture of it, and so here we go. I started another tab with Abdul Razak Gurnah, and then Memory of Departure. Now, I'm lucky. My library has 3 of his books, I believe, and on audio. And I was able to get this one immediately. I actually just got a second one, which was on hold. It came in, and I have a third one on hold. So I'm gonna talk about this book. But wow, was I shocked! This book was crazy. It was nothing what I expected, okay? Now, for Nobel Prize, I guess the content, they don't mind what the content is about, because I wouldn't call it pornographic at all, but man, they talk about a lot of sex with among young boys. Now, the whole thing about it is it's basically a result of poverty, and how older boys exert control over younger boys in this poor environment, and how you have to fight, and if you could fight and be the dominant one, I don't even want to go into it more than that, but this was not at all what I was expecting. And so the whole book is about this boy who's growing up, and he's trying to escape poverty, and that's what it's about. It's his memory of getting out, his memory of departure, and halfway through the book, he's able to get away from his immediate family, who lives in extreme poverty, and he goes through some very traumatic events, like the death of his older brother, who's always protected him, and he's blamed for it. I won't go into more than that, but he's able to go to live with an uncle who's a bit wealthier, and so the rest of the book is about his time there, and some relationships that he forms. But it's a very, very compelling narrative, and it was nothing like what I expected. And I'm very, very much looking forward to reading another book by him. So as a Nobel Prize winner, that was my first exposure to Abdul Razak Gurnah, and I'm very glad that I read one of his books. Okay, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, I'll give a report on another book by him. Okay, the third book is another book recommended by, Eric Carl Anderson. And that is A Very Short History of Life on Earth. Now, this was recommended as one of the best books of the year by him. And excuse me. The subtitle is 4.6 billion years in 12 pithy chapters. Now, this is out of my wheelhouse, right? This is natural history, and I certainly like jumping into this category every once in a while. I do so. Um, I really, really enjoyed this book. The what is interesting about these books is they take something that is very difficult and put it in digestible chunks for people who aren't in this field. And this also just reminds me of how much I do not know about this earth. Like, so much of the description of what happens in this book is happens over so many millennia, and like we're focused on this little slice of history, right? But there's so much history before, like even involving like the different types of how do I call them, humanoids, like the primates that become like the humanoids, right? But there's so much history about all of them, like the different branches that would eventually die out. And fascinating book. Like the first, I would say, three-quarters of the book don't even involve primates at all. Like it really goes through like the history of like the formation of land, and then like the creatures that would be on the land and all the different paths that evolution took. And what's really interesting is he will go through the evolutionary paths of even those ones that died out, and it gives you a sense of where evolution could have gone, right? If those branches had flourished, and our branch, the way that we took, we could have easily been snuffed out at so many different places, right? And other branches could have gone. And another thing is like the last chapter of this book, which is not that short, starts talking about where our evolution is going if we're to play out in history. Like, it's hard to explain, but all creatures follow an evolutionary path, and they eventually do die out and or go extinct, and others are rising up. And so it's talking about where, if we follow our natural evolutionary path, where we will stop and what will continue. It's a fascinating book, and this is definitely a book I would benefit from listening to multiple times. Just because there's so many interesting facts in this book that I think the more I hear this, the more it could sink in. There's just so much to be learned about the history of the earth from a book like this. And if you're interested in, this would be a great jumping off point to go further into so many of these topics that he brings up in this book. Makes me want to study more and learn more about. Okay, so that is a very short history of life on Earth by Henry G. or G. 4.6 billion years and 12 pithy chapters. And again, I am so thankful to Eric Carl Anderson for recommending that book. So worth listening to. Okay, next we have another book that he recommended, which I did not want to read. Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. When I looked at this, I thought, ugh, okay, so it's about a woman with all her relationships, and she's going through this unnamed depression disease, right? It's not a real one, it's made up. And I just thought, oh no, this isn't for me. But he recommended it. Oh my God, best book of the year, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to try it. Wow, was I wrong. I was hooked to this narrative. In fact, I stayed up really, really late, and I haven't done this in a long time. I stayed up so late to finish this book. I was hooked. I couldn't stop. Now, that goes to show you that the writing, the caliber of the writing overcame the subject matter for me. Like, the writing was so good that I was hooked. I cared about the character. I cared about what was going on in her life, and it's built around this premise. Okay, there's this woman going through all these relationships in her life, and she's got overwhelming illness that she can't seem to overcome in her life. And it's how she treats the people around her. And to me, it all just sounded so, done, right? It's been done in so many other books. And and I'm not interested in the subject matter to begin with, right? Because it was about a young woman and her relationships. And like, to me, I don't really care about 20 somethings and their relationships. They've always been like so boring, those books. Wrong. This one was so good. Like I said, I couldn't put it down. Highly recommended. You really do feel the pain of her journeys and her discovery along the way, and why she reacts the way she does, even though we understand, and she also understands, that she shouldn't be reacting this way. She can't help it because part of her illness is she's got to react the way that she does, because it's part of her getting through the whole process. And of course, I I started rooting for her and her relationship, right? It was like one of those young adult novels where you're like, I read a lot of sci-fi young adult because they're just fun. And they always have a love interest, and at the beginning you're just like, okay, you just got to get through it. But by the end you're like rooting for them, right? It was just like that. I was rooting for these characters, to get through their differences and get together. I don't want to spoil more than that. I mean, I haven't given away a lot of the book. There's so much in it. But it's a really, really readable book that can open your eyes to issues that people that mental illness have and how they have to deal with things in life. It really does put you in that mind state so that you can empathize. Highly recommended book. So Eric Carl Anderson did me right again. This book was phenomenal, and I couldn't put it down. Next, okay, we got the biggie. God, Emperor of Dune. Okay, so this is the fourth book in the Dune Chronicles, and I've done the other three. This is the fourth. In fact, I actually had listened to half of this book and had to return it, and it's been at least a few months since I had returned it and got it back. But I was able to jump right in. I think I can spoil things in this book because it's like you're not reading these books for the plot, because it's all about the way Frank Herbert weaves together politics, and these books are so strange in that it's, even though there's a plot, every chapter is just another talk about politics and politics and politics. I mean, it's ad nauseum. It's like, okay, now the next character comes and they just have a discussion about politics. And then the next character comes and they do the same thing as it relates to that character. And it moves the story forward, but it's very strange writing. So anyways, God, Emperor of Dune, the fourth book. The first two books deal with Paul, right? And so he becomes the emperor, like the Messiah. And by the third book, I think it's Children of Dune, we deal with the two children. And then this book carries on the one child. His name is Leto, Leto. And he merges with one of the sandworms to become a human worm hybrid. And the reason he does this is he wants a sense of immortality, because okay, this is a little bit complicated, but he contains within him the memories of all the Bene Gesserits, or all of the people who came before him. I forget exactly what it is. It's because of the ingestion of this spice. And so let's just take it for granted that he's got all the memories of all of his ancestors, and he can use these memories to plot out a golden path. It is the only path in which humans will survive. It's like in Doctor Strange and Thanos, like he goes through every incarnation of the future, and there's only one way, one path where they can beat Thanos. It's like this in this book, right? There's only one path, and he's got to forge that path no matter what. And in order to forge that path, he must become an immortal so that he can lay the foundation for this path to happen. And he must do whatever it takes to make that path happen. So in this book, he's already like 10,000, I don't even remember. He's like really, really old. And what's weird about it is he's got the same characters with him because they're just clones of like, for example, Duncan Idaho. He's a clone. He just keeps bringing them back over and over and over and over. And same with some of the other characters. They're just like all reincarnations of other characters from the early books. So it's very weird in that sense. So in this book, Leto, he's tired of living. He's at the point where he just doesn't want it to continue. He's this gigantic, monstrous worm that no one can relate to, and he controls the entire universe. He controls the spice. He's cut off all the other planets because without the spice, they can't travel through space. Hyper travel, like that's what allowed them to do like their hyper jumps and be able to travel the vast distances of space. It was the spice, and he has it all, and he controls it all. And and the whole planet of Dune is already like wrecked. There's no more sandworms left. And sorry if I'm spoiling this whole book. I think that even if I knew what this book was about, I would still read it. And so that's kind of why I'm talking through it. It's just such a weird series of books. And like, I'm tired of holding this up, by the way. This is the 4th book of the 6 that he wrote. And then there's a whole slew of others. I'm obviously going to keep going. But this is the 4th. There's 2 more that he wrote. But at the end of this book, like he dies in such a gruesome way, but he knew it was coming and he wanted it to happen, and he set it up so that even if he were to die, the golden path would emerge and it would continue. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. But like I said, these books are just so weird in that they're just all these tracts and treaties about politics, and it sounds like it would be really boring, but Frank Herbert keeps it entertaining in some weird way, because every character that comes in, even though they're talking about politics, they use that to move the plot forward just a little bit. So that and then the interactions of all the characters. But I'm not going to say it's like the greatest thing I've ever read. Like, most people would be fine with just reading the first Dune. It's enough. But if you are curious about this world, it's definitely worth it to keep going. Like, if you're a science fiction fan, and you want to see the different ways that science fiction plays out, well, this is definitely one of them. And these books are very good, right? But I mean, it's more of the same. So let's see where it goes after this giant worm is gone. All right, we're getting there. I think we got 2 more. Oh wait, no, maybe that was number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, we're on the last one. And this one is a really short one. So this one is another one by Annie Ernaux, which I already hinted at earlier. So this one I just finished today. So this one is called Shame, and it's another one of these books that are only 2 hours long. So like I said, I think I really like that Annie or No is a great way to enter or to jump onto. I need to get this thing to stop shining on my face. She's a great way to jump into the hold on, I can't get this to jump into the Nobel Prize, because her books are so short and you can get them done so quickly. Like, I'm already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the 7th one that I've read over the course of what, a couple weeks, maybe a month. And all of her books, as I mentioned before, they feel like they're all chapters of one long book. And it will be interesting. Let me turn this off because it keeps shining on my face. I can't even find the off button. All right. It will be interesting to see all of these put together in some kind of order. Now, this one starts off by mentioning a shameful event that kind of traumatized the writer when she was young. Okay, and so she goes on. I'm going to try not to spoil too much of it. But from there, the book goes in places that I didn't really expect, but kind of rehashes some of the ideas that are in some of her other books, although she does go into greater details. So she starts talking about society, and this leads to her education and events that shape us, and how these lead to like moments of shame in our life, and how we deal with them and why they arise. And yeah, like I said, she focused a lot on her education in this book, and that part was very interesting. I just, from the beginning traumatic event that she experienced as a child, I didn't see how that was going. I really kind of wanted her to focus on more about what that event meant and how it was able to arise. But she didn't. She moved on. She does cycle back, because it involves her father. She does cycle back to her father, and shame, but it's more in the idea of class, versus a shameful act that he performed earlier in the book. So anyways, this was not my favorite by her. Still, wow, let me get that out. My favorites so far still are the ones about her mother, a woman's tale, and I Remain. What is that one called? I Remain in Darkness. I Remain in Darkness. Those are still my favorite. And then the next one would be the one about her father, a man's tale, something like that. But anyways, this one does go more into her, like I said, it still talks about her family, but now, even though she's talked about education in some of those other books, she goes more in depth in education here. And so, like I say, all of these books kind of weave together. It's still her same style, where she's older and she's looking back on events that happened when she was young and she's writing about them. Very enjoyable. Not my favorite, like I said, but I'm still I still got at least 3 or 4 that are available that I'm going to be delving into, for the ones that are available in English. I'm sure after I'm done, I'll kind of do like an overview of her work and what's available and what I haven't been able to read. But anyways, so I'm going to stop there. So I went on and on ad nauseum for about 32 minutes, about 6 books. I talked 5 minutes about my COVID ordeal. Remember, let me get that out of the way. I'm going to post another video tomorrow about all the movies and the shows that I've watched, mostly while I've been in, this COVID state. And although a bunch of them were from before. And then I'm going to make a 3rd episode dealing with some controversial topics, some comics that I read, especially the art. And that's going to be pretty, I think, to see. I'm going to talk about some of the music that I've gotten and I've heard, and I'm going to try to pay tribute to Topol and Kenzabur Oe in that final episode, which should bring us to my regularly scheduled program on Friday. If you've watched this and you liked any of the books, or I don't know, just please, I love the comments. Of course, anything that you have to write about, I will respond to. What have you been reading? Please let me know. A lot of people don't tell me what they're reading, and I'd love to hear or read about what you're reading. And if you put that and I haven't read it, I'll probably put it in my list and read it. And then when I do read it, I'll give you credit for that. Whatever. I get a lot of new books that way from recommendations. So yeah, I guess that's it. I'm running out of things to say. My COVID brain is kind of like running out of steam. All right, thank you all for watching, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.